Hi, my name is Nick Dallett, and I am an engineering manager for the Site Reliability Engineering team here at Expedia Group. Today, I'm here to help some smart, capable, technical people, you, learn how to better showcase their talents by learning to create and deliver more effective presentations. Let me start with a story. So when I first moved to Washington State, I lived in a small shack of a house, which was heated entirely by wood. Learning how to quickly and efficiently split firewood was a key life skill. And learning that skill was what got me through my first rural Washington winter. I would take a billet of wood and place it on a chopping block. Take my axe, line it up, and try to hit the wood in exactly the right place to split it cleanly along the grain. I thought that that was the point. Hit the wood in the right place. But I was wrong. Most of the time, I would successfully get the axe stuck in the wood without actually splitting the wood at all. See, the problem was I was focused on the act of chopping rather than the outcome I was trying to achieve. So how does that apply to your job? Well, I see a lot of engineers giving presentations. We do them in knowledge sharing sessions with the team. We do them to external teams and stakeholder audiences. Sometimes we go out to conferences. We also write blog posts and emails trying to get our point across or trying to achieve some kind of outcome. But a lot of the time we're not focused on the outcome. We're focused on the information in the presentation. What I want you to get out of today is that giving a presentation is never the point. The point is that you want to achieve some outcome, and the presentation is a tool that you use to achieve that outcome. If you can just internalize and learn that, it's going to make you more effective in your job and more successful in your career as a result. Now, you may ask, how should I have been splitting wood? Well, I'll get to that, so stay tuned. Here are the topics that I'm going to cover in this presentation. At the very end, there's information about, where you might go to learn more. But of course, I'm always happy to help people fine-tune their presentations, happy to give that feedback, as long as you commit to listening to the feedback and using it to improve your presentation and your content. This slide has a few pretty decent reasons for why it makes sense to spend some time to get better at building and delivering written and spoken material about the stuff you know. Does this resonate with you? Do these seem like good reasons to spend the time? What if I rephrase this last bullet a little bit differently? Being able to go really, really deep on a topic, to dive into all the details, swim in them, learn them quickly, and become an expert on a topic really, really fast, is something we expect from our engineers. It's why we hired you. Now, being able to sift through that detail, quickly understand the key things that are important, and present it in a way that makes it look simple, demonstrates a higher level. And while giving group presentations is not necessary in order to get promoted, after all, there are plenty of introverts at higher levels, it's a great way to demonstrate your ability to analyze and synthesize information. And if you do like to give presentations, it's worth the time to learn how to do them well. Now that I've helped you understand why you should care, I want you to think about, why should you listen to me? Well, I've been on stage trying to get people to care about stuff since I was back in high school. I've done this stuff professionally. I've also done it for fun. I have had training, the same kind of training that CEOs and government leaders get, and I've gotten it repeatedly. But the real thing I want you to take away is that I failed. I failed to get key decisions made. I failed to present a compelling business case. I've confused people, VPs, SVPs, customers, and partners. This stuff is hard. I mean, it gets easier with practice, but it never really gets easy. You have to put work into it. Over the years, I've gotten better at it. I've gotten consistent. I've gotten to the point where I can give good feedback, and I can help other people get better. And I'm hoping that you'll take some time to get better than you are today. I'm hoping that some of you work hard enough to get better than me. The advice I'm going to give holds no matter where or in what format you're trying to present a case. I mean, giving a chalk talk and writing a blog post require a slightly different skill set, but your approach to the material is materially the same. The way you present a topic needs to be aligned to the outcome you're trying to achieve, and often this is very closely linked to the who. You're going to approach existing customers in a very different way than you approach prospective customers. You're going to approach somebody very differently if you're trying to get something from them than if they are trying to get something from you. Let's look at a scenario that shows a little bit about who might be in the audience and how you might approach them differently. So let's say you want to get a new IDE for the team. You've noticed there's a lot of churn in the code base because the seniors keep having to go fix people's code to change tabs to spaces and other equally inane stuff. It's taking up time. It's even causing bugs. So you grab your principal engineer and your senior director and you pull them over to your desk. You say something disorganized and technical that probably sounds to her like, tabs are spaces, lol. Jim is all, I know, right? Your principal engineer might be caught a little off guard, but she gets what you're trying to say and she tries to catch up and be supportive. Meanwhile, your senior director has already tuned out. So what went wrong here? Well, Jim already knows your problem. You don't need to convince him. This argument isn't for him. Your principal engineer should be your ally. You really shouldn't throw her under the bus like this. You should have pre-flighted the conversation with her so that she can help you make an effective case. Your management just needs to know what you want and what you're asking for. All right, let's look at you on a better day with just a little preparation. You've taken a bit of time to understand what your senior director cares about. You've understood the problem and you've figured out how to frame the same problem in a way that clearly articulates the opportunity and the ask. Jim doesn't care. This isn't for him. Just make sure his needs are met. You've already had a pre-meeting with your principal, so she's right behind you and ready to support the ask. Boom. So let's talk about how to actually build effective content. There's never a time when you are, quote, just giving a brown bag, unquote. If your manager asks you, go tell team X about what we're doing around chaos engineering, ask your manager why and what outcomes are we trying to make happen. Here's some example goals. Do we want to get partner teams to use our tools to help reduce outages? Do we want to get help to build a new capability? Do we want to find the right team to help us close some open issues? Do we want to get support for our choice of chaos tooling? You should also be asking questions like, is this the right forum to have this impact? Do I have the right people in the room? And how do I structure my presentation to bring about the outcome I'm looking for? When you do technical work, you start with a problem statement. You go through a lot of analysis. You come up with options, and then you choose the right option based on your analysis. I've sat through or read lots of presentations that recapitulate that entire process. You are making me sit through everything that you did to get to the decision. Cut it out. I get it. You're smart. I'm paying you to do that analysis. Don't make me do it all over again. What you want to do is to get as quickly as possible to the key message you are trying to drive. Remember all those essays you wrote in college? You started with a thesis. This is what I believe. And then you provided supporting arguments to win people to your point of view. That's the model you want to use here. Tell us the answer, and only give us the details that are needed to support your case. Depending on the audience and the purpose, you might go into more or less detail. You might not need to go through the details at all, but you want to have them ready as supporting material in case you get asked those deep questions. More on that later. What you start with and how you structure your material should directly support the outcome you're looking for. and it should call out what's important. If all we see are a bunch of identical trees, we'll never get out of the woods. If you can zoom out and show us the structure of the forest, we'll be flying high. Help your audience interpret the data so they discover the so what that makes them care. Show them that you understand what they care about and that you understand the material well enough to make it match. People in positions of authority have great bullshit detectors, and they will ask questions to figure out how well you've thought through your argument and how well you know your supporting data. If you have statements in your presentation that beg an obvious question and you don't address the obvious question, that's not good. That's bad. You should read over your material to look for obvious questions and rewrite your content to answer them. If you say, "We won't be able to get to this work in Q4," you better be ready for questions like, "Why not? When can you get that work done? How can I help you get that done faster? If you were going to get that done, what other work would we have to stop doing? And how many engineers to get that done too?" If you don't know, don't pretend. Say you don't know, why you don't know, how you could get the answer, and by when. And if you need other people in the room with you in order to answer anything that might get thrown at you, then make sure those people are in the room or on the call. If you remember only one thing from this presentation, I want it to be this. If you don't practice your presentation, it's gonna suck. Full stop. And there's really two reasons to practice. One is that you want to be able to deliver your content smoothly. You want to know what your key points are and how to get from one to the other. An even more important reason to practice is to improve your content. Practicing helps you uncover flaws in the structure and presentation of your argument. It helps you discover places where you have wrong or conflicting messaging. It helps you discover where you're going to struggle to connect with your audience. You should be ready and willing to throw out and rewrite your content based on what you learn when you practice. If you aren't willing to do that, then you're not getting the full value of your practice. When you practice, you aren't just reading your slides silently. You aren't mumbling the words under your breath. You are standing up, projecting to fill the room, and speaking at full volume. You're picturing your audience. To your kids and your neighbors, you might look like a crazy person. If you're in the office, you might want to book a conference room on a different floor from your team, close the door, and just belt it out. When you practice, videotape it. Watch it back, recoil in horror, and then fix it. Let your observations guide further practice. Do dry runs with your team, with your manager, with technical experts in the subject. Take their feedback and use their feedback to do rewrites. If you can, do one or more dry runs with somebody who represents your audience. You probably don't want to do a dry run in front of your VP, but if you have a buddy who's a senior director, they can help you tailor your presentation to the right level to be effective. Ask them, is it clear what outcome I'm trying to achieve? What decision I'm looking for? Ask them, how would you react if I was presenting this to you? When you actually present, take the time to set the stage. Introduce yourself. Provide context. Why are you here? What are you presenting and why? What are you looking for from this audience? What assumptions do you need them to share in order to best understand the material? You should have already written your material so that it gives the broad strokes for context, so that when you get into details, people understand why they're important. It might look like, "Hi there, everyone. I'm River. I'm from the developer education team, and I'm part of the crew that's helping to roll out some of the new language features that we'd like to make standard across the organization. I'm hoping you can help me get this information out to your developers, and so I'm here to introduce some of the topics I'm hoping you'll support for your engineers. I'll give some context on the particular feature I'm talking about today. You probably already know that Node.js is a system that runs JavaScript server-side, so that you can do back-end development using the same language that your developers already use for front-end development. One problem developers struggle with is that JavaScript handles asynchronous programming in a way that becomes difficult for non-trivial applications. Because of that complexity, there's a new concept. It's called a promise, and that provides language-level tools for developers to use for asynchronous programming. I'm going to show you how to use promises, how we plan to roll out this feature set, and how it will affect your devs. While you're presenting, present bite-sized pieces. Think sentences, not paragraphs. Leave some gaps so that people have time to process what you're saying. Make eye contact with your audience if possible. Check in to see if they're understanding the topic. Ask them to repeat things back. Have a look at their body language to see if you're connecting with them. If you aren't, stop and fix that. Ask them if they're with you, or if they'd like something. Stop and solicit questions. When people do ask questions, think about the question they asked before you reply. The question will tell you a lot about how much they understand and how successful you've been at communicating. Are they asking because you failed to communicate the right thing in the right way? Are they asking because they didn't understand what you said? As a matter of fact, are you understanding their question correctly? Do you need to repeat the question back in your own words to make sure you're answering the right question? What you want is for people to ask intelligent, targeted questions that show that they understand what you've told them, and they're able to see their way to the next level of conversation. If they can't ask that level of question, then that might be because you haven't given them the level of understanding they need. Now I've given you what are, in my mind, the most important aspects of presenting technical topics. Now let's look at one example of how a presenter approached preparing and giving a presentation. First, they reached out to their intended audience to find out what they wanted to get out of the presentation. They scripted a tight, compelling intro to try to draw the audience in and get them interested. They left just a little mystery to keep people wondering. Oh, incidentally, if you swing your axe aimed at the top of the wood you're chopping, you'll stick the axe in the top of the wood, or you might swing too shallowly and hit your feet. Instead, you should aim your axe at the chopping block below, so you cleave straight through the wood and leave your axe safely in the block. That's aiming for the outcome you're trying to achieve. Back to our presenter. They tried to move beyond their own perspective and put things in terms that their audience could relate to. They worked to present to multiple learning styles in order to make the presentation sticky to the largest number of people. They did a dry run in front of expert presenters and engineers who represented their target audience. They got amazing feedback, which they used to make the presentation better. Now that you know everything that I know, it's time to figure out what's next. Not everybody wants to become great at presenting, but if you do, the right thing to do is practice. One great opportunity is to find a Toastmasters International office near you and go join one of their groups. That will give you lots of opportunities for extemporaneous or prepared talks. If you work in the corporate world, talk to your manager about opportunities within your organization to present to various groups. Practice every chance you get. Ask for feedback and use the feedback to improve your performance. That's all we've got for you today. So I want to thank you again for listening to this talk, and go out and be great.